What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. I like to say, hey, C. Will, what is up? I'm also a certified empowerment coach, and I'm also president of Express Your Vibe Coaching Communications. And as always, we have we have epic conversations. And tonight, another epic conversation. And I'll give a little background. I do a lot of searching on the online on interesting stories, interesting conversations. And something stopped me a little while back. There was an article called Mixed Feelings, Mixed Race, A Path to Freedom. And I began reading this article. I said, you know what? I have to get this young gentleman on the conversation here because race is always a hot topic. But a lot of times we don't get a chance to hear younger individuals' takes on race. And this is a powerful piece. I'm actually going to put the link right now into the chat for people because I have a feeling we may be on for a little bit and I want people to be able to read the article and get some background. So here we go right there. So if you click on it, you'll find out this is written by Alexander Williams. And Mr. Williams.
Hello.
And like he said, we were chatting before we went on. He got a bow tie on.
Oh yeah, I think you can see it, right?
Yeah, he got the bow tie, so he's styling and profiling. He says, taking a WWE riff of the Ric Flair, the Macho Man, not the Macho, no, the
Nature Boy, I think that's what it was.
Boy from North Carolina, Ric Flair. So we are very blessed and favored, highly favored, to have Alexander here tonight. He's going to share a little bit of himself. He's going to share a little about the article. He's going to give his thoughts about growing up as a mixed race child in America today, especially these days, with all that's going on, with all that's happening down the road in the election. And definitely, Kiana and Siwil, thank you so much for jumping in. If you want to come in and join the conversation, the seats are open. The commentary is open. I'm excited about this because I don't see too many conversations with these young people talking about this subject, especially online. So we are blessed to have you. Alexander, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. First and foremost, thank you for having me. I'm a really big fan. Since you reached out, I've kind of researched a little bit about you as well, and so I'm really, pleased to see what you are doing and the type of work that you're trying to achieve. And I want to deeply express my thanks for letting me be on here, and that you enjoyed the article so much because that was a really big thing for me to put out. With my platform with Huffington Post, it's an opportunity for me to be as vulnerable and as critical as I can be. So bringing my personal experience to, a large media that is the internet, and really trying to see what is critical about, like, what does this mean? I grew up this way, or I had these experiences, but what does that mean for my community? What does that mean for America? What does that mean for us at large as humans? This is 2016, and yet we're still campaigning for the Black community in the United States for things we fought for in 1964. So what does these types of cycles say about us?
This is powerful. So as you see already, he's on his game for this tonight. So he's not joking, and we got more people will join in, but two right people right now. Again, if you want to jump into the conversation big time. Alexander, I want to find out a little bit more about you. Where did you grow up? How was life growing up? We will certainly get to the article and now those topics, but let's find out a little bit more about you. Where did you grow up? How was life?
I grew up in a little town called Lancaster, California. It's around an hour north of LA. It's 100% desert. In July, temperatures can get around 110 sometimes. So if you can kind of gather how people will, take to live in that type of environment, it was really hard because Lancaster, especially since I've gone back and I've gone away to college, it's becoming gentrified, which was really interesting to me because it started out as such a small desert type of community. It's traditionally conservative. And because of that, you have these generations of people living with that type of mentality. And honestly, it made me the person who I was today, but I wouldn't raise my kids there. So let me just throw that out. But I grew up. I am one of 9 children. I live with
Oh, how many?
one of 9.
Okay.
For the most part, 7 were in the home, on or off. I'm the total complete middle child. So I don't know if that tells anything about me, but I've heard it does. And we grew up mostly poor since my father and my mother separated. I was raised almost single-handedly by my mother and her side of the family. My father is where I get my African descent from, and it's a little bit of my Native American as well. And then my mom is mostly European and Native American. And so living, in that type of community where it was really segregated. There were some parts of Lancaster which were, low income, Black and Latino, mostly, living there. And then there was higher income, whites or Asian people living there. And so you could kind of see different values and different things happen in those types of communities. And so for me, my childhood was really a battle about kind of figuring out who I was, because there's people in the Black community there that wouldn't accept me as a Black person. There was white people there that wouldn't accept me as a white person there. So, I internalized a lot of that. And a lot of my adolescence was really spent figuring out who I was, because I was being told so often that I wasn't this or I couldn't be that. And so, when I got to college, I went to the University of California, Santa Cruz, go Banana Slugs. And I really, blossomed because first it was a culture shock. I'd never been in Northern California before. But after that, it was just like there's no one there physically or not telling me who I can be. So I kind of, started figuring out all of the answers to who I was and who I wanted to be. And from there, I just, I got the confidence to just go forth and really pursue that, because I ended up doing a lot of things that mattered to me, whether or not I knew it or not.
Okay. So in the time that you're growing up, one of 9 kids, were your parents still together at that time?
They were together since 1988, I want to say, 1989 perhaps, and they separated 2001. So for the first 8 years of my existence, they were together.
So how was your life, if you can remember that far back, because of the environment that you're in? Mm-hmm. How was your life while you were with your parents? Then how did your life turn, especially identity-wise, defining your identity after your parents separated?
Oh, well, that's actually, so first off, great question. Second off, I think when they were together, because I had 2 parental roles and kind of 2 figures, the mother figure and the father figure, because it was a lot more cohesive in that way, really what I dealt mostly was internal. So what my family members would say about me, or what my dad or my mom, said I couldn't be or could be. So in my first 8 years when they were together, that's kind of how my identity was shaped. And then after they separated, I didn't take well to their divorce when I was younger. So I had this cycle where I was trying to, get like a family outside of my own family. And so those types of people that I would then connect with became my outlet for my identity at that time. So, in my younger years, it started internally with my family as a unit, and then branched off to my local community as I started growing up.
I think that it's almost like, and I don't want to make this sound too crazy, but like a double whammy, that A, your parents are no longer together, and B, during this challenging time, on top of it, you're trying to define who you are at that age group. How did you do it? How did you, as for lack of a term, I'm thinking of a Bob Marley song, coming in from the cold, so to speak.
That's a good song. Good song.
No, that's just really, because even before we're getting to your article, this is a story in itself, because I did not know about this part of your journey. And I think this speaks volumes about the individual and the character that you have. And I just really want to know who helped you, because it couldn't have been all you during this time.
Oh, no. It was, yeah, I've been told my story is really unique. It makes explaining my life a lot harder to people because they can't really relate to what I've gone through. I guess like my best analogy is that I've always thought my life was like an FX drama. And I really hope that maybe some type of executive is hearing this so we can maybe get together. But, I couldn't have done what I did in terms of figuring out who I was, figuring out how I wanted to be, figuring out what type of values I wanted to embody without really special people in my life, mostly teachers. I have to say, even though Lancaster is whatever in terms of other categories that you want to describe it with, but I've had some of the most phenomenal teachers ever in my life, like work at those schools. I had this teacher named Mr. Irvin. He actually taught my brother most of his life, and I TA'd for him in middle school. I was hit by a car, and he, on his way to the school, drove next to me, stopped, made sure I was okay, told the school about it, and like was there every step of my recovery process. And that's just, a teacher that, mind you, taught my brother that I didn't have a personal connection with, but he saw two kids in this type of situation and was saying like that's not okay, that there's no one, for them there. And so really it was those type of mentors that really, told me how I should live my life. So much of what I do right now is me trying to give back, not only to my Black community or my Native American community, so on and so forth, but just the people that were like me back then. People that thought that they didn't have anyone because of what they were going through, because of their identity issues and everything. I need to do this type of work, writing the articles for the Huffington Post and whatnot for those people, because people like the amazing teachers I had saw the beautiful human that I was, even though I didn't see it. And so that's kind of why I do the work that I do.
I want to spend a little bit more time before we get talking or sharing about the article. When did you start the turn of finding your identity? Do you remember some incidents or some moments that said, I'm beginning to make that turn to know my identity more and more?
Yeah. I'm trying to write an article about it right now. It was when my 17th birthday. So growing up, I always had this really big issue about, needing to prove that I was something. So needing to prove that I was white, needing to prove that I was Black, whether that's skin color or characteristic wise, how I act, my personality. And, it got so bad for me that after my mother and my father separated, sometimes I would carry a picture of my father and myself with me, just so I could say, here's a Black man and here's me. This Black man is my father. I'm Black. So now we can put to bed everything else because, I'm Black, and so on my 17th birthday, I was detained, arrested. I would just say physically threatened for being Black. I went to the Antelope Valley Mall to shop with a friend of mine that I've known since childhood, my Black friend. And we met up with a couple of his friends there. We were purchasing items. We were, stimulating that economy. And after we met up with a couple more of his friends, we were stopped by mall security saying that there was a group rule that we had never heard about because, I come from a family of 7. I've been to this mall before, never heard of a group rule saying we couldn't be without 4 more people. And so there was a group of white women conveniently located next to us. That was a much larger group. And I told them, why aren't they violating the same group rule that you're saying we're in violation of? And this small security guard informed me that, they weren't scaring the customers. And I was like, okay, well, what about us is scary? What's intimidating? She said the way we look, the way we're dressed. Mind you, my friend is in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles shirt and Nikes, so I don't really know how, scary that he can be when he's also 5'8". So I don't really know how terrifying he was. But at that moment, I started to really understand, the racism behind so many institutions. I've always experienced racism on some level in my life, but I really started to understand the systems placed upon it after that. And so we were escorted out of the mall. Mind you, I'm still shopping here. So we were escorted out of the mall. The mall security called for backup. There was, I think, at least 10 of them escorting me and my friends out of the mall. So here we are. We're standing outside of the mall on these stone steps. And who do we see but the Los Angeles County sheriffs pull up on these stone steps on the mall property? Actually, like, they have to drive on the mall to get there. And this dude's partner gets out of the passenger door. He cocks a shotgun in between the crevice of opening the door. And the driver gets a bullhorn and tells us that we need to get off the mall property. He's going to arrest all of us. He called us multiple explicitives that I'm not going to say there. And I was so hurt by that experience because I felt so dehumanized. I was local patron, giving this mall my money, and I was only treated for my skin color. I wasn't treated for the color of my money. Was my money no better than anyone else's? And so here they are, the Los Angeles County sheriffs escorting us away from the mall. They call up a backup police cruiser to follow them. And then behind them is the mall security. So we literally have 3 different waves of law enforcement escorting us off of this mall. And at that moment, I really didn't look at Lancaster or that area or the United States the same, because, that's really when I really understood the subtleties and, sometimes not so subtleties of racism, and how it affects me. Because at that time I was still, kind of struggling with my personal identity. And then, here I am getting chastised for something that I can't even become a part of. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So I think at that moment really was the turning point for me about, really understanding all there is to understand about these topics.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing some of these stories. They're powerful, and I'm just welcoming Ricardo and Ms. Rashim on the line. And if anyone wants to come on in, you can certainly take a seat, or comments are going on the side. And the story you just shared has some powerful impact at Happy Work Week, and Ricardo McQuay were just wow. They were going wow to that story. Let's get to the article. What made you write it?
Well, I wanted to talk about, I think, some things that, way out, like we talk about racism a lot. We can talk about it. We can talk about the systems that are put in place upon it, all of this type of things. But what are we saying when it comes to, interracial couples, and how does that factor into racism? So my mom and my dad, when I was growing up, would often share with me stories about how they were dating and what their life was like before I was born, when they lived in Burbank. And, when I would hear these stories that my mom would tell me, I couldn't believe it, because, here are things I thought they would hear in like 1940. My dad being called the N-word and all this other type of stuff, like, just for holding hands with my mom. I thought that these types of experiences were so detached from the type of world we live in now that, after hearing about those, it just really made me want to be more investigative about it. So as I grew up, and I've gotten to my own relationships, I've started to understand and experience what my mom and my dad have. I'm in a relationship with a white woman at the moment. And going down to even Orange County, I've gotten really weird and nasty looks at just from holding her hand. She's from Orange County. And, it's stuff like that made me realize, okay, here I had all these problems as a mixed child, but what was really the predominant, stem from that? Okay, it's racism about interracial relationships. Because if we can't understand or accept mixed kids, then we're not also accepting how they are coming to be brought. How are they coming to be brought out? And that's through interracial relationships. And so I thought that that was a really interesting angle to kind of look at, because that's something that, touches a lot of people, because not everyone, statistically speaking, a lot of people still marry in their race. But with the type of, global type of community where we're looking at now with the power of the internet and all these platforms, a lot of people are starting to come out their comfort zones. And so we're starting to see an increase in interracial relationships. And so for me, it's about saying where that history came from, and what we're still doing right now about it.
Okay. So you decided to write the article. How long did it take? And was it a difficult article to write?
I'm going to say it took around 3 months, maybe. It took me a while because I didn't know how to form it. I wanted to share kind of my experiences as a mixed race man, coming to understand my identity and what my identity was, but also, talk about the larger things that were in place with that. So, I could give you my profile as a mixed race man, but what kind of context can I provide so that you understand more about that, or so that you can understand, the type of larger themes that are in place here? The racism I receive as a Black man, is very special in terms of my own intermixed raceness. Do you see what I'm saying? So what does it say about, what can I say about that will relate to so many other things at large? And so for me, a lot of it was just kind of formatting the article around that. That's why I brought in those types of those block quotes that are supposed to be voices and sentences that were said by real people. Like real people said those things. I didn't just make it up, and put quotes in there. And so it was how can I relate things on the personal level and then also on the universal level? That's really what I was going for there.
Here's a question from at Ricardo McCrae. When did you start to notice specific racism against you as a Black man?
When I would be the only Black dude in my group of friends when I was little. Oftentimes I was the token, one. And it's when I grew up, as I was growing up, I thought that, racism was always just something kind of like you knew it when it happened, it's like, boom, someone's being racist. I sometimes thought that was how racism went. But now I'm starting to understand how racism is so much more on a micro level, than it is on a macro level. So when I look back about the types of things that people say to me, calling me an Oreo, or, calling me a faggot because I'm too sensitive as a Black man, that's when I started understanding specific things against the Black in me.
Mm. So the micro cuts of the new racism, Ricardo is saying. Good, very good take. I read this article, and after I first read it, I had to sit back a bit and just have a moment of quietness, because there were so many things that I could relate to. And as you're saying yourself, you were thinking, these things, haven't they been eradicated? We're still living in that time. So one of the things I want to ask you about this piece is, how prevalent is the racism amount to your demographic? How are you treated being a mixed man, basically, by the individuals in your demographic?
Well, it's really interesting, because I've found out, and I mean, this even goes to, my own Black community, my own Native American community, so many things. When it comes to identifying race or kind of understanding an individual's race, people are really shallow. They literally, at first will just look at your skin color and then make a judgment based off of that, or your hair. So I understand that hair is really a big thing as well. And so for me, because I have racially ambiguous features and my hair, is straight, but it's curly, but it has other stuff going on, people can't sometimes figure out what I am. So they just go to the closest thing that they know, so it might be, they might say I'm Mexican because I have a darker skin, but I have straighter hair. They might think that I'm Samoan. They might think I'm, this or I'm that. And so, when it's your own Black community saying that about you, you start to think, okay, how do I not physically look Black enough? Because by the police, I'm treated as I'm Black. But, to some of these Black people, I still can't seem to be Black. So I think it's a much larger problem kind of across the board, because we have to ask ourselves, why are we trying to put each other in this box where you have these types of attributes, you have this type of personality, and, regardless of your skin color or anything, that's who you are. So it's saying, so moving forward, it's about saying no to that and knowing that, when it comes to race, these things are a spectrum. When it comes to, say our blackness is not put in a box. Our blackness is so much more than we can even know or think of what it is now, And so I think for me, it's really just trying to get that message across where, it's not a static type of idea. It's very dynamic.
I know that if those who haven't read the article, one of the interesting parts of it was the Toys R Us story. Mm. And I want you, if you can, to share with it. It's part of the article, but I think it adds more power if you get a chance to share it with our audience here.
Yeah. So that specific instance, I was remembering I was a child, probably around the age of 8 or so. And we would go with my mom, to Toys R Us. And on this particular day, we were stopped by a lot of people. I don't know if it was just because the Christmas, season or whatnot. And this also kind of goes to those micro aggressions with racism. But, people would walk up to my mom and say, oh, man, these are really great looking kids. Like, are you babysitting them? Like, did you adopt them? What have you? And so we got all these types of comments as we were going to the store. When I was a kid, because I didn't really understand the larger things that place there, I just thought these people were dumb. I was like, oh, man. And these, it noticed that.
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay. So I had to know that.
Okay.
That there was so much more to this than even I realized. And so I asked my mom after we got done from Toys R Us, like what those people meant by asking those types of questions. And she just informed me that, because I don't look like her, I get that a lot more often than I should. And, I don't share a lot of physical traits. I say this in my article. I don't share a lot of physical traits with my mother, but you can notice them if you just look at our faces hard enough, And so it's that amount of shallowness, which is what I'm referencing to, where people just look at me, they look at her. She's so many shades lighter than I am, and she has, European features on her face. And so they took one look at her, one look at me, and the only association that they can bring us to is adoption or some type of ward of the state program. The thought that entered their head never was about, oh, this is a woman and her children. This was a woman and maybe some kids she's babysitting. So what does that say about us and how we handle interracial relationships and mixed kids in general for that to be the norm?
Okay. Well, I am very blessed to have both these ladies coming in on the conversation, especially Rashim. You have never come in, so I am so blessed that you finally have jumped in. This is so good. And we also have Cynthia at Mom's Winning. And also, so ladies, I'm going to let you just speak with Alexander. Go for it.
I love that title, by the way, Mom's Winning. I'm all about that. All about it. So I think a lot of what I hear you saying and what I feel like, Alexander, is really around the politics of identity and the agency that each individual needs to have in terms of like being able to self-identify. This is who I am. And I also say to, around the politics of identity and having the ability and the sense of agency to be able to self-identify, there are people who sometimes within the context of microaggressions, like directly are trying to take jabs at you, and sometimes ignorantly maybe saying something that's just inaccurate. Like they're not necessarily, for lack of a better word, I'm just going to use a blanket statement and say they're not necessarily a bad person. They're just unknowing of something. And sometimes you just have to say, no, that's my, because if they haven't had an experience where they have been exposed to something or have seen it, at the very least, it is just inaccurate. And I think in terms of when we talk about race, yes, I feel like biologically, we're actually all biologically of the human race, right? And race, as we know it, when we connect it with ethnicity, is really more or less a social construct, right? It's a social construct with real applications, as we see in our caste system, in this hierarchy of, in a hierarchical caste system, when we look at race, class, gender, all of these things are social constructs, but they still have real life applications. And I think some of, too, what it ends up doing is it makes us not only identify our differences, which I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think sometimes it makes us separate ourselves by differences. Lighter skin, darker skin, you're from here, I'm from there. Or we've decided that it's on a hierarchy and I'm better because of this, you're worse because of that. I eat this, you don't eat that, and that sort of thing. And I think that some of your experiences are very much around just exploring the politics of identity. And I haven't read your article yet, but I'm definitely going to read it after hearing you talk. And I also I'm looking forward to hearing more stuff that you write as you go, and have these experiences, because I think that there's a lot around identity that are intersectional and are overlapping. For example, with the situation that happened in Orlando, we have a young man who was actually born in this country who had then become radicalized and had issue with two men kissing. So then there's this LGBT lens, right? Because of the young men's sexuality. And then there's another thing of it. 4 out of 5 of everyone of the people there were Latino. And then there's this. So it's just really so complex in how we look at these things. But I think it's important to remember 2 things: that one, racially, like as a race, biologically, we are all the same. And race, as we see it as a social construct, is just a social construct that's not, based in biology. And I'm going to shut up and let Mom's Winning talk now. That's it.
No problem. Cynthia, thanks for your patience. And I know you wanted to come on earlier. You told me, so I'm glad that you're here. What would you like to share with Alexander?
Oh,
yes, I agree. I hear that.
I agree.
Since you got right? So there's an echo.
Someone's echoing. Someone's echoing.
Maybe Rashim.
Maybe Rashim. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Hmm. I'd be a millionaire. Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Mm,
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm.
All right. You know what? I'm going to ask about one of the more powerful lines in Alexander's article, and I would just want to read it, and I want him to enlarge on it. And the line is here: the common thread that connects all mixed race individuals is the inclusion and exclusion we receive from our communities, and how we navigate through our own individual paths toward identity, acceptance, and freedom. That is a boom quote. Yeah, man. Like you said, yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. How difficult is it for you to weave among the communities, Alexander? And do you ever get tired of doing it?
Well, you know, so to touch on what Cynthia and Rasheen was saying earlier, yeah, there, you know, when I am tackled by people that, you know, are either racist or just ignorant, some of the time I try to keep it as an option to like educate them, you know. So I get asked the question, what are you? Probably the most, you know, not like what race are you or what ethnicity are you, but mostly what are you? You know, and at first I want to just say, hey, I'm a human being. I don't know what you may be, but you know, I start to take the chance to really use that to educate them, saying, hey, you know, first off, that's probably not the way to try to ask somebody, you know, I know what you mean, but that's probably not the way to try to ask somebody that question. And so when it comes to these types of inclusion and exclusion that mixed race individuals feel in their communities, you know, it's really based upon how we individually are as people and how our local community, you know, either accepts that or denies that. So for me, growing up, you know, I liked a lot of rock music. You know, I was eloquent when I spoke. I got really good grades in school, you know, so on and so forth. So with my black friends, I was like the white guy of the group, even though, you know, I could be only a couple of shades lighter than they were or whatever. But, you know, because I fit personality-wise a certain box, I was placed with that. And then when I would go to my other set of friends, which were, you know, any kind of race, let's just say they're white, I would be the black guy in that group. And so I would be treated differently through these two communities, even though I'm the same person. So I could, you know, blend in with my white friends because I liked the same things that they did. But because of my skin color, I was always denied an access that they had to each other that I couldn't get. And it's the same thing with the blacks. And so for me, I think what the problem is that we set up an environment, you know, I'm talking about we set up an environment where that becomes the norm, you know, where even if I prove to you that I'm black, you don't necessarily believe it. Like that's like, it's like something I need to be able to show on the drop of a hat. You know, I don't have like a black card that you can like scan and be like, oh yeah, no, we scanned his black card. Trust me, he's black. And so for me, it was just a lot about, I had to teach myself how to navigate through people, you know, because if I have to navigate through all these type of local communities, then by the time I get that on a macro scale, you know, I'm navigating my life through the American society, you know, not just about the people that live in Lancaster or the people that live in, you know, this city, but general people in the world. So what it taught me a lot was how presentation might be everything, because, you know, like what I said before, and that you have to be confident in who you are. You know, everyone's might say you are not this thing, you're not this, you are that. But if you know who you are in your heart and you have the confidence to be that won't waver you as much as it would another person who's still struggling with identity.
I'm curious, Alexander. Oh, sorry.
Wow. Late. Okay, let me just take you off mute. Seem, go ahead. Yes.
Okay.
You're echoing
curious,
when you're not on. So
you were saying about
on my side. So go ahead.
You know, you try hard to prove them to you that you're black, and I was just thinking to myself, if I had to prove to someone, let's say it was someone who was blind, or someone from an outer space, I was just trying to think to myself, how would I prove to them that I was black? So I'm just curious about what were you using to prove that?
I told Dr. Vibe a little bit before the two of you came on, but I used to, when I was younger, I used to carry a picture around of my father and me, and I would whip that out and be like, whenever someone would be like, "Oh, dude, you're not black," I'd be like, "Boom, this is a black man. This is me, obviously. So you can't really deny this." And to me, I did that so much as like a tool to survive, to like have friends and stuff. But looking back, I didn't realize how damaging of an act that is, and the fact that I needed to do it. You understand what I'm saying? So the fact that I needed to keep a picture of my father and me on my person, that to me is kind of disgusting about how we treat each other in our Black community. That shouldn't need to happen. Like, a person that is lighter than you, shouldn't need to still keep around their family tree just so that you can have the peace of mind that they are whatever you think they are. Because that's just to me, that's so disrespectful about who people are just in themselves, and what, because when you try to deny someone their race, you're trying to deny them their experiences based upon their race. I've been profiled, I've been harassed, I've been ridiculed because I'm Black. So when Black and white people and everyone else tells me I'm not Black, you're denying me those experiences I've had as a Black man. And really, when I was growing up, that's what made me mad the most about it. It's like, okay, you might not think I'm Black or whatever, that's cool, guy. But for you to sit there and try to deny me what I've gone through because of my race is what I find to be the most disrespectful.
Wow. Mom's winning.
Mixed squared. Mm-hmm. Mm. I like the matching dresses. That's cute.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. I'm going to chime in a bit here. Ricardo McCrae's asking you, Alexander, but what about the white part of you? Do you identify with that part of your culture?
I mean, it's not like I reject, my European blood or anything like that. I maybe I'm speaking about this from a biased standpoint, but like, I don't know what white is. Like in terms of, I guess, how it applies to me, like, I don't know what you would say qualifies me in the white realm. I mean, so I guess from the black people I've talked to and everything, they mostly state that my interests in like comic books and, I say this a lot, like rock music, and I guess certain types of those things qualify me as like my white culture. But I don't like, I just don't think that those types of things apply to a race, because they're up for consumption, as pieces of media. So I don't see how they have, unless they're like black comic, to black people. I don't see how you can put a race in there for liking these things, So if I were to say, how do I identify as, European? It's like, it's what I know about the people in my family that are from Europe, and then the European history and European culture. So I guess if I like classical music, that might be a white thing. But, like, I've also learned a lot about Chopin and Bach and Beethoven. I guess that might tie into my white culture. But to me, it's not something that I know know a distinct example of. So I can't really speak to it on that.
I want to chime in an interesting. Go ahead. No, I want to also ask. Go ahead. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yeah. I also wanted to say something, Cynthia, that you mentioned earlier. It's funny that you say you're from Chicago, because my father is from Chicago, and I believe he's from Inglewood, which isn't really doing too hot as of late. And so, but most of his family still lives there. And for me, I think one of the things that will really help me, down my path of identity and, spirituality is visiting Chicago and specifically visiting where he came from, because, we had Spike Lee make that movie Chirac that came out pretty recently. And, we know that for, I don't know if it still is, but, Chicago's been the murder capital for some time. So it's like, for me, I want to understand where, such a large, amount of our people live. I want to see what that environment created for them. I want to see how that affected them, and how it would affect me, as Alexander Williams individual, and then Alexander Williams, a prince from this era. So it's like my father, is from this type of environment, and the experiences he's gained as a black man are, detailed to Chicago specifically. So it's like, what can I learn about him by going there? Because I think that one of the things I'm really starting to understand as an adult, and this ties back to, ignorance and whatnot, is that a lot of times your environment about where you grew up, where you're living, where you're going to plan out your life affects so much of your mentality, because you're constantly surrounded by people that have this particular thing. And, you touched upon it a little bit ago when you were saying we all have this need to fit in. And I think for me, I really started figuring out who I was when I stopped caring about fitting in.
Oh, I was just saying church.
Wow. That's a powerful statement. I'll take her off Go ahead.
Because I think to me, it's just like, as a mixed race man, when I started figuring out who I was and, being confident in that, that's when, that's when I started feeling free. That's speaking to that quote you mentioned earlier, Dr. Vibe, that's when I really started down that path of freedom, is when I, let go of all these chains that, were compromised of people's opinions about me and what I was supposed to be, not only as a Black or Native American man or all this other stuff, but just as a man in general. So, you have these masculinity, issues, and, how that plagues, the Black community, saying, how my father for a good amount of time in my life would give me crap. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to curse as much as I can on this show. He would give me crap for being sensitive. Because apparently, sensitivity, really being emotionally open to things that happen in your life isn't perceived as a manly thing to do in the Black community, So it's things like that really are what I'm trying to understand and fix when it comes to these larger issues.
But I think I'm muted.
Okay, I want to just ask, what's your parents' reaction?
I don't know
to
if
your
my
article?
mom read it. I don't know if my dad read it. So I couldn't tell you. But I think if they would read it, that my dad would probably say that it was a lot harder than I actually even explained in my article, which I think sounds a bit underwhelming because, for him, I can't really imagine how it must have felt for the community around him, Lancaster specifically, to be so against him because of a choice he made and who he wanted to start a family with, if that makes sense. Here he is in this really hostile environment, and he's just trying to survive. He's trying to provide. He's trying to do these things, and everything is going against him, in doing so. And so one of the things, my feelings on my parents might be whatever, but I always try to keep in mind and, admire the fact that in a society where everyone rooted against them and their love, they still found the courage to try to do it, and to, try to make it work. And so for me, that's really where I found the strength to write that article, is because I needed to get that across as much as I could, because, without that union, I wouldn't be here. And so for me, it's also trying to pave the way for other people, because every relationship that I'm going to be in my adult life, unless I marry my sister or something, is going to be an interracial relationship. And so because of that, I'm going to have to face a lot of the things that I detail in this article. So it's, how do I use this article to not only relate all these personal experiences and whatnot, but try to start paving a road where, my kids wouldn't have to go through the same things that I did growing up. Like Cynthia said, trying to make our children stronger before than trying to repair. What's that Frederick Douglass quote? It's much easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. So it's, it's just really about, and women, I mean, but it's really about, living up to that, type of mentality.
Anyone want to add? Because I'm telling you, I got to start bringing out a portable mic and just dropping it periodically these days, because you're hitting it hard, Alexander. You're hitting it hard. Good stuff.
She said.
I mean,
by the way, Ben, another question. What is your girlfriend's thoughts on the article?
She just couldn't believe it. She just didn't think that people were still like that, I guess, I mean, maybe I'm much more perceptive to my surroundings, and how people think of me than I think she is. I think that's just because we led different lives. So a lot of the times I can see the microaggressions in things when she can't. And so for me, hearing her talk about it after she read it, it was just a lot of like, oh my God, like what does this say about America? And like, why do people have to continually be this way? Like, this is 2016. Like, are you still like, is some dude still going to be upset about me like holding hands with her? Like, come on, man. We got bigger things to worry about here. We really do. So it's like, for her, it was a learning experience. And it was a personal experience that she hadn't necessarily gone through herself, but wanted to empathize and wanted to understand. And that's what I'm trying to do with this platform, with the Huffington Post, is really try to use it to educate people. I'm not trying to attack, like, oh, white people are evil, or they do this or that, they do that. I really try to showcase, hey, this is my experience. I experienced this because of these larger systems. Now, what can you gain out of it? Not having gone through it at all, but hearing me tell a story. What can I do to educate you while I do so?
Very, very, very good, man. Very good. Ladies, keep it coming. He's on fire. Don't let him go. He is on fire.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Dr. Bob and I were talking about a little bit ago. I was raised with my mom and my dad until 2001. I was born in 1993. And so for the first, half of my life, I was with both parents. And then afterwards, kind of, really in the adolescence period. And after that was raised solely by my mom and her side of the family. Not very insightful counsel, unfortunately. It evolved a lot of, that's the way the world is. You're going to just have to, write it out, or, not put yourself in a situation like that, or, so I didn't really come to them a lot when it came to these types of issues. I tried to ask, people around me and the mentors that were in my life. I really went for them about these types of issues. So, so I think maybe why I was so hesitant to open up to them was the fact that because I was navigating this really toxic environment for me to understand my personal identity, I didn't know if they would understand it or not, because, my dad is a black man, and, he's mixed a little bit with Native American, but I don't know. I don't think he really self-identifies that way. So he's largely a black man. I don't know if he has the emotional capability to have a, conducive talk with his mixed son about mixed issues. And so that's really where I thought the disconnect was with me and my parents, is because we never had like a really open dialogue in terms of, hey, we look different than you and we look different than each other. So like, this is how, these are the type of issues you might face. We never really had that type of talk. So I didn't know how to start that dialogue with them when I was going through the things I'd gone through.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna jump in. Another question from Ricardo McCrae for you, Alexander. Have you ever used your biracial identity to your advantage?
Yeah. I don't know if I've done it consciously or anything. I use it a lot when I'm dating people. So it's a so I guess it's type of like it's like a Key and Peele thing where I don't know if you've seen that skit, but it's when a white girl, she's having a date with a mixed race man, and she's trying to tell him when he shouldn't use his quote unquote blackness or like the black in him. And so I think how I guess I use my mixed race to my advantage is that for a lot of the girls that I sometimes pursue, I end up being the safe black dude for them. So it's like, oh, he's not totally there, so like my father wouldn't kill me if he got me with him, but he's black enough to satisfy what I'm looking for right now. So I think, subconsciously or whatever, I may have participated in that. But, going through my life, I was so caught up in being told I wasn't or was something and trying to reconcile those feelings, those emotions with that I may have benefited from being a light-skinned black man. I mean, I don't know when, but it probably happened at some point, And so for me, like I've been more so focused on trying to realize, how these experiences shaped me more so than, individualizing like that.
I think, am I?
Yeah.
People I mean, I so appreciate your honesty, Alexander, and just so being open to situations where it may have benefited you that you may not be aware of, because that happens as well. That earned and unearned privilege that comes along with different parts of our identity. So I just appreciate your honesty in that, and your open and your self-awareness around that.
Oh yeah, I mean,
one of the things that
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No worries. One of the things that I try to be mindful of myself in terms of anytime where we're talking about race or culture, is really just to acknowledge and promote not just cultural competency, but cultural compassion, and cultural compassion for other people as well as for ourselves, right? Like some people who are ignorant, they're not, you know what I mean? That what they call it, unknown biased or unaware. I forget the exact term for it, but I think what we need outside of knowing, I shouldn't say outside, in addition to knowing what
Her internet connection is not going good. Okay, so you know what? I'm gonna click her out of the see if she wants to come back in, or if someone wants to jump in. The time is now. I'm gonna say something now, and I'm gonna say it before we leave the conversation, Alexander. When people tell me that our young people don't provide us hope, I know there's at least one person I can point to.
I appreciate that. It's very
serious. So
That's awful. No, that's.
well,
I mean, it's.
go ahead.
Oh, no. I mean, that's I
Okay, go
really
ahead.
I take pride in that. Maybe it's because I was told this when I was a kid a lot that I'm an old soul, and so I think for that I really ran with that identity and tried to go for it. A lot when I was growing up, because of how I grew up, I was forced to reach adulthood mentally a lot earlier than I should have been, and so for that I kind of just tried to take it in stride. It's like, okay, I may be wiser or I may be smarter than the people in my environment or what I'm put into, but it's like, how do I use this the best way that I can? And in college, the way I try to do that is I just try to be as involved as I could, because knowing the type of person that I am, if I'm involved with something, I'm gonna give it 100%. And so with college, I joined an ethnic student organization called Black Men's Alliance. I led that group for a year. I improved membership. I improved our standing with the community in Santa Cruz. And, I did so many things because I felt that it needed to be done. And that's a lot of what I do with, the articles is I see that it needs to be done. And I just take the opportunity to do so. And, for me, it's all about trying to help people because, the more we divide ourselves, whether it's colorism in the Black community, whether it's, black and white and all this other type of things, we're not solving the massive large issues that we have today, where it's like income equality. Yeah, we can talk about the specific racial problems within that topic, but until we, solve this, we're not going to be able to solve the whole thing in of itself.
True. Let me ask you, what are the good qualities you have in your opinion right now from your mother and your father? What are the best traits you've taken from
I think
from your
it's
mom and your dad?
the blatant honesty from my dad. He can just sometimes just say things and be like, well, I said them, they're there, so good luck with it. And then my mom probably, this might be a weird answer, but her stubbornness, I think, would be a good, because like for me, I take it as like not wanting to give up. So I become stubborn with things because like I know I can affect it a certain way, or I know I can do something with it, and I want to do it because that's what I feel is right. And so I try to take those qualities and kind of work them together. Sometimes I do take off a little too after my dad than I would like. Sometimes I've had people tell me that I can be too honest and I'm like too real, but I just don't believe that's a thing. Like, with people today, like I've learned that so much of adulthood is like backhanded, like, like middle school comments and all this other type of stuff. I just don't want to be a part of that. I don't have time for it. That takes energy to me, and so I just try to, take what my dad and my mom and, my childhood has given me, and I just try to be the most positive I can be with it.
Nice. Cynthia, you want to add it all? Okay.
Oh, thank you. Please take a look
Okay,
at my article if you've already not done so. I hope you appreciate it. And I'll actually go ahead and put in some links to my other articles I have as well, just so, if anybody could check those out if they want.
Okay. Well, if anyone wants to jump in for a little bit, Askia Jones, I know you may want to drop in. I've got Angelica, and Angela. What am I? My mind's Angela. You can jump in. Ricardo, if you want to jump in. Gonna stay on maybe till the bottom of the hour recording wise. So Alexander, who who are people that influence you in a positive way other than yourself?
I want to say my siblings. You know, my siblings are really, they provide me strength to do what I do today. With having so many of them and having the type of struggles that we did growing up, you know, I really take pride in having the bond that I do with them. And so that really provides me strength. The mentors I was telling you earlier, you know, I really would not be in the position that I was today if I didn't have great, you know, mentors, that people that just believed in me. You know, I think nowadays it's so like overlooked about teachers that like take on students and really try to get to know them and then educate them, because you don't know what that kid's going through, you know? So when you try to emotionally connect with them or just show that you care, you know, it opens so much up about them and what they may be going through that's so outside of school that they can then start to connect with school through that teacher. They're like, okay, this is a representative of this institution that probably doesn't care about me, but he seems to care about me. So let me try to care about what he's trying to tell me. And so that's really, you know, where I found a lot of strength at. My friends, you know, definitely the ones that, you know, I've known for years and years, they've provided me a lot of strength. And then it's also people I look up to in our, you know, in our communities. I say the biggest impact on my life, you know, I guess as an artist has to be Donald Glover, otherwise known as Childish Gambino. And for me, why he was so impactful is because he had a lot of the experiences that I had without even being as light as me. You know, he was rejected by the Black community that he grew up in because he acted too white, because he got good grades in school. His family wasn't just a stereotypical, you know, mom is a crack addict, dad's never there type of thing. He had both parents in his lives. So to his Black community there, that made him less Black. And, you know, hearing him and seeing him take the experiences that he did and make something of it, and then try to do, you know, then try to educate people and bring other people into it. That to me was so influential, because I was, you know, I sat there and I was like, wow, this is a guy who's gone through a lot of the things that I've gone through, you know, and he set up a path for himself and said he was going to do something, and he went out and did it, you know, and no one can take that away from him. He might not be the most popular rapper. He might not be this. He might not be that. But you can't take away the fact that he's transcended his past experiences, you know, and what they may have done to hold him down emotionally and what have you. And so for me, that's the type of mindset that I look, you know, at this. Like, you know, I could be dead in a ditch somewhere, you know, because of everything that's happened to me in my life. But I'm not, you know, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I'm looking forward to the next day and the day after that, because, you know, you meet people sometimes and you have an impact on them, and you leaving that impact or you meeting them can mean so much to you that you don't even realize. You know, I've had conversations with people for 10 minutes, never seen them again. And they've impacted my life, you know, in an absurd way that I never knew before. You know, so it's like, it's those types of experiences that really propel me for what I do.
Do you get a chance to speak to your parents often?
My dad sometimes, my mom, not so much. I have a very tumultuous relationship with my parents. A lot of that because of the people that they are. Right. And then a lot of that is my childhood. And so my mom, I pretty much cut her out of my life. And then my dad, you know, he and I just got a lot of things to work out. So.
Okay. So building on that, and if you're comfortable answering this, if you had a chance to say anything you wanted to them, either individually or if they were together, what would you want to tell them?
I would say thank you for making me, because you did something right. And then, no, that was so egotistical. And then I would just say, like, I'd ask them what happened. You know, like, there were times when I was growing up where I saw the amount of love that my mom had for my dad, and the amount of love that my dad had for my mom, and how we fit in as a family, you know. And, I saw that just crumble first between them, as partners, husband and wife, and then through us as a family. And, what I really would like to get out of them is, why did they antagonize and hate each other so much that they then let their kids be collateral damage for that? And I think that's something that not a lot of people take into mind when they talk about, children, is their relationships with their parents, both on an individual scale and together, and how that affects their family as a unit. We had so many siblings growing up, each one of us took the, path that I took much differently, because we're different people. So here we have this base level of, racism and all this type of stuff that we face. And, we branched out into so many different things because, of our individual, identities. And, those were just so much more fragmented than they needed to be, because of what my parents didn't do for us, not in terms of like trying to provide or anything like that, but just taking care of our emotions, taking care of what we might face on the day to day. And so, I think really that's what I would try to get to the bottom of.
Okay. As we're going to start winding down the conversation here, I don't know if you get to speak or be in the environment of mixed race young people who are younger than yourself. Do you at all?
I'm sorry. Can we
some of your siblings? No, I just wanted to say that. Do you feel it's more difficult or less difficult now being a child of mixed heritage than it was when you were growing up?
I want to say it's less, but then it's like, then I would just like then you could have said that back in the 90s, like to someone that grew up in the 60s. It's like, oh, it's way, less harder for a mixed couple then as it was when I grew up, So I want to say it's less, because, I want to believe that we are, I'm talking about America here, are taking strides in acceptance, and tolerance of others. So I want to say it would be less harder, but the end result that I know says differently. So, I'm trying to reconcile the two, but, my younger siblings, even today though, still they have a lot of problems because, no one knows how to navigate their own identities. They say that they look at some type of ways, so they must be that way. And, I see a lot of myself going on in them, where they're being influenced by their environment and by the people around them. And they're internalizing that into their racial identity. And they're not doing it in a very emotionally constructive way. So it's like up to me to try to make sure that they don't, go down the same pitfalls that I did when I was growing up, when I was trying to reconcile those emotions and whatnot. So for me, I try to look, I had these tough experiences and whatnot, but they don't need to go through what I had to go through if I can help it, And so, that's the way I try to look at that.
Okay. Last conversation piece here. What is your greatest concern when it comes to mixed race children? And what is your greatest hope when it comes to mixed race children?
My greatest concern is that to quote my article, I said that some will succeed, some will fail, and, getting to their path of personal identity and their path of freedom. So my concern is that mixed race kids will fail in doing so, and in which case they'll damage their life by doing it. So, the type of experiences that I had as a mixed kid, I could have, committed suicide, or I could have not have been a positive contributor, in my community or whatnot. And so my concern is for the, kids to go down that path, to fall under the weight of everything that they've been going through, and to not realize how beautiful that they are just for being themselves, you know. And that kind of ties into my greatest hope is I hope that mixed race kids know that they're the future, because genetically, I mean, they have a bigger gene pool to pull from. So a lot of the genetic, defects just doesn't happen because of that. I mean, they are the future because they represent what America is supposed to be. If we're supposed to be this melting pot of all these different cultures, of all of these different people, then having such a bigger mixed race community will provide you the embodiment of that. And we'll say, hey, we are the melting pot because look at how, freely everyone gets to be when they want to love each other. It's like a black man doesn't get chastised anymore for being with a white woman. So it's that's our progress noted with this mixed race child. So it's trying to understand that.
Well, we got one more question for you, and I wish the gem would have came on and asked it, but I have to ask it under his behalf. He's saying, Askia Jones is asking, what are the factors you believe that may cause mixed kids to fail, and then how can we prevent that from happening?
So a lot of the factors, can stem just from what they're dealing with individually, and how they're participating with their local communities. And I mean, it's also, for me, I think the factors would be, who do they have as their support system? So for me, I got a lot of support from friends and from my mentors and, those types of people. But it's what if they didn't have those things? Then it's who's supposed to guide them? If they have these struggles and they have these questions about these struggles, but no one's there to listen, then they can because they don't have that emotional outlet, they can just internalize that can fester in them, and poison their own, levels of thinking. So it's how do we prevent that? Is we start creating a different environment, and that's created when our individual communities recognizes that we have a lot of work to do. The Black community in America, as a community, as our individual sect, we have a lot of work to do. Sometimes we aren't open to talking about colorism. We aren't, available talking about, queer spaces in the Black community. So it's we have a lot of work to be doing, in our individual community. So if we really identify what needs to be done and, start fostering a more supportive environment around those issues, then we give them, those kids that, may have support or may not, we give them a better chance just to figure out who they are and go down that path.
Well, on that note, we are finito. That was good stuff. Alexander, I'd like to say again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. If many of our youth are like you, we've got a lot of hope. You give us a lot of hope, and I can see a lot of the comments here on the side. You can read. A lot of people have been very enthused and inspired by what you had to share from your heart tonight. If anyone wants to touch base with you, how can they do that?
So you can hit me up on Twitter. I think my Twitter handle is there at Dan the Mail Forum. You can comment on the articles themselves. If the comments are constructive, then I reply to them. You can also just find me around the web. I'm a musician, so I also have a SoundCloud and those types of things. So and I try to be as open as possible. A lot of the times I think people, when they see this type of content, with these platforms, they don't think that this person is accessible to them, that they can't just start a conversation. But I try to be as inclusive as possible because that provides a framework for what I'm doing. I'm out here trying to connect with people and trying to talk to people, and so so I try to be as open to that as possible.
Excellent.
But also,
go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you for having me on here. I really appreciate it. This has been wonderful. So thank you so much. I'm very humbled.
Well, the pleasure is mine, and the only thing I'm going to ask is I'm going to invite you back.
Oh, really? Really? That's what I was hoping for. I got a little scared when I didn't hear that.
No. Well, no, you know what? Not only do I want you back, but a number of people here who've been watching the conversation would like you back, and they really appreciate, again, what you've had to share. When is the next article for the Huffington Post scheduled?
I'm gonna try to get it out before the end of July. So hopefully that happens. I'm working on some things right now. Hopefully I can send them to my editor. You know, he can get back to me as soon as he can, and I can put them up. So I'm going to try to get it submitted to them before the end of July. Hopefully something out by August. Got a couple of pieces that I'm working on right now. So which one will go up is anyone's guess. So stay tuned.
Excellent. We'll talk offline. I may have some other opportunities to get some of your stuff out on other platforms. So we will certainly chat offline. It is Dr. Vibe. I'm host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. I'm also a certified empowerment coach. I'm president of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. I'd like to thank everyone who stopped by tonight. Ricardo, Askia, Cynthia, happy work week. Kenneth is in the room. Kenneth Aston. Thank you, Angela. Also, S. Rashim, for the first time coming in on one of my blogs. She always likes to hang out in the background, but it's the first time she came in. So, Alexander, you must have done good because she don't come she always just watches. So you must be doing something good. I know there may be some other people that I've missed out, but I just like to thank everyone for coming on and contributing tonight. Alexander hit it out of the park. A number of times he dropped the mic, and certainly read his articles on the Huffington Post. Support him wherever you can, and he's just doing good things. And that's what the family's about here on Blab, just supporting everybody who's doing good things. So, like to say, as always, you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith. And if you didn't catch the whole thing, catch a replay. Bye-bye.